Good evening. 9 News has obtained extraordinary vision of the moment a drug-fuelled prisoner scaled the dock at the Christie's Beach Magistrates Court, taking on 2 guards and a police officer.
This is Daniel Nicholson, a man in his 30s who happens to be a father of 4. Unfortunately, he found himself in a troublesome situation as he was accused of possessing weapons, setting a car on fire, and stealing a motorbike. Despite being released on bail while waiting for his trial, things took a dramatic turn for the worse. Daniel ended up facing additional charges for attempting to escape custody and recklessly causing harm to an emergency worker who was authorized to provide medical assistance. Due to Daniel's previous encounters with the law and a track record of misconduct, the magistrate eventually decided that he had had enough and revoked his bail.
I revoke bail. I revoke bail. No, you can stop.
Daniel continues to express his disagreement with the magistrate's decision regarding his case. At one point, he goes as far as standing up to make his point.
Take a seat. Take a seat.
Miss, please, miss.
Please, miss. I'll show you what please, miss is.
However, Daniel's restlessness reaches a tipping point, and he makes a sudden decision to flee. In an attempt to escape, Daniel rises from his seat and leaps over the court dock. However, before he can get very far, multiple officers swiftly intervene to subdue him. A physical altercation ensues as Daniel throws punches at the officers, who respond by pushing him to the ground. Despite the resistance he faces, Daniel remains determined, repeatedly getting back on his feet to continue his assault. He even tries to evade capture by leaping over a table, but his momentum causes him to collide with it instead. In a final effort to flee, Daniel stands up again and heads towards the exit, while a woman, who is holding his son in the background, repeatedly pleads for them to let him go due to his alleged illness. However, all the officers present manage to restrain him, bringing his audacious escape attempt to an end.
A frantic fight for freedom. This was Daniel Nicholson's daring escape from the dock. High on drugs, the young father breaks free from 2 sheriff's officers before meeting his match, a police prosecutor.
As a result of the violent escape attempt, one of the court officers ended up with a broken foot and had to wear a special protective boot for a period of 8 weeks. Daniel attributed his extreme behavior to his use of crystal meth, but he was nonetheless arrested and taken into custody. In terms of legal consequences, he was issued a fine of $320 for the weapons possession charge. Additionally, he received a prison sentence of 21 months, with the possibility of being granted parole after serving 1 year as a result of his disruptive behavior in the courtroom. This is the hearing of Paul Wade, down in Kentucky.
Standing in for Rob Eggert on behalf of Paul Wade.
This is Paul Wade, who is 31 years old and has been arrested and placed in custody due to his alleged involvement in the deaths of 2 individuals named Edward Lamont Smith and Alexis McCrary, both aged 26. Specific details regarding the arrest are limited, but according to court documents, Paul is facing charges directly related to these homicides. As Paul's lawyer speaks to the judge during the hearing, faint murmurs can be heard from the families of the victims in the background. However, the disturbance caused by these murmurs quickly becomes disruptive to the ongoing court proceedings. To address the situation, a court officer promptly admonishes the families, urging them to maintain order in the courtroom.
A little bit different. Mr. Eggert is
Quiet in courtroom.
The judge warns the families that they could be ejected from the courtroom due to their disruptive behavior. However, the families plead with the judge, emphasizing that they are the relatives of the victims, and despite their pleas, the murmuring continues.
You're going to have to leave the courtroom. You have to
We all family.
Okay, y'all got to not talk.
Our man's gonna let him know.
No
talking in the courtroom. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Everything is proceeding smoothly within the courtroom until the moment Paul exits. However, as he departs, he silently utters what appears to be the word B***chi towards the family sitting in the gallery. Instantly, chaos erupts as members of the family leap over chairs and give chase to Paul. They continue their pursuit through the hallway, with one of the family members going as far as vaulting over the judge's dock to confront Paul. In the midst of the commotion, Paul accidentally strikes his head against a door before fleeing from the scene. Despite attempts by one family member to pacify the situation, their efforts prove ineffective. In response, court officers resort to using pepper spray on two individuals in the hallway. Subsequently, the courtroom doors are locked and everyone is evacuated from the premises. Recognizing the pain experienced by the family, the judge endeavors to restore calm and order to the situation. After the incident, Paul Wade was promptly apprehended and placed in custody. Meanwhile, 4 family members named Joshua Smith, Isaiah Smith, Joshua Whetstone, and Monetra Kane were arrested and faced charges for misdemeanors. These charges included disorderly conduct and obstructing government operations.
Thomas, you're a wonderful actor because you wanted this court to believe that a child was in your care who had suffered over 50 injuries to her body, that somehow you noticed that she was not breathing in the back seat of a car, you were driving 75 miles per hour, talking on the phone, and reaching back to the back seat to administer what you called CPR to this child.
This is Jasmine Gordon and Clifford Thomas, 2 individuals who have been convicted for their involvement in the murder of Jasmine's daughter, Jamila Smith. Clifford, who was Jasmine's boyfriend but not Jamila's father, faced charges of involuntary manslaughter, felony murder, second-degree murder, and second-degree child abuse. The Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office conducted an investigation into Jamila's death, determining that it was a homicide resulting from multiple blunt force injuries. This tragic loss deeply impacted Jamila's family and the community at large.
The medical examiner testified that the injury to the child's pancreas occurred approximately 7 days prior to her death. He indicated that the injuries that this child has sustained, she would have been in a lot of pain, and that her health and her ability to move around would have deteriorated greatly prior to her death.
The circumstances surrounding the tragic death of young Jamila Smith were undoubtedly incredibly distressing, and it's understandable that anyone connected to her would have experienced immense pain. On the day when Jamila's father had the opportunity to deliver his impact statement, he made a truly profound and lasting impression. As the scene unfolds, it starts off relatively calm until Dwayne unexpectedly throws a punch that lands squarely on Clifford's head, causing him to stumble and lose his balance momentarily. Clifford, clearly tempted to retaliate, is restrained by a court officer. On the other side of the courtroom, Jasmine is visibly distraught, weeping and repeatedly uttering the name Jesus. The chaotic situation necessitates the intervention of numerous court officers to restore order, ultimately leading to Dwayne being escorted out of the room. Despite the disruption, the court proceedings eventually resume. Jasmine receives a sentence of 14 to 25 years for first-degree child abuse and an additional 7 to 16 years for involuntary manslaughter. Clifford, on the other hand, is sentenced to 7 to 16 years for involuntary manslaughter, along with an additional 1 to 2 years for resisting arrest. This is Dale Williams, a convicted murderer who was awaiting sentencing at an Ohio courthouse. However, before the sentencing could take place, he was unexpectedly attacked by the 2 sons of the woman he had killed. Dale had been charged with multiple felony offenses, including aggravated murder with a firearm, felonious assault, and illegally possessing weapons. His victim was Elizabeth Pledger Stewart, a 46-year-old woman. Witnesses in Youngstown reported seeing Williams chasing after Pledger Stewart, which led to his initial arrest. Tragically, Dale then crashed his van into the back of Pledger Stewart's car. When she exited the vehicle, she was mercilessly shot multiple times in broad daylight. This heartbreaking story is one that brings tears to anyone's eyes. During Dale's sentencing hearing, the court provided an opportunity for the victim's daughter to deliver an impact statement. However, the situation took an unfortunate turn from there. In a fraction of a second, Anthony D. swiftly leaps over the table while Jerome Stewart maneuvers around it. Anthony quickly seizes hold of Williams' legs, forcefully toppling him from his chair and applying a leg lock, simultaneously delivering kicks. Meanwhile, Jerome relentlessly pummels Dale with punches. Even after being tackled by court officials, Jerome persists until he is eventually subdued with the use of a taser. Throughout the tumultuous incident, the sound of their aunt's sorrowful cries echoes in the background. Dale is escorted out of the courtroom for medical evaluation. Subsequently, both brothers are arrested and removed from the court premises. Following the legal proceedings, Dale Williams is convicted of murder and handed a sentence of 23 years to life. As for Anthony D. and Jerome Stewart, they face charges of assault and obstructing official business. This is Sydney Newsome, who is facing a domestic violence charge. Sydney is visibly restrained with both shackles and handcuffs, indicating the gravity of the situation. As the court proceedings commence, Sydney appears relatively composed. However, his restlessness becomes apparent when the transport officer taps on the table, likely signaling that it is time to leave. Despite this, Sydney's composure shifts as his mother and brother enter the courtroom. He moves towards them, seemingly wanting to briefly speak, but the transport officer calls him back. The judge instructs Sydney's family to take their seats, and the court proceedings continue smoothly. Sydney engages in signing some paperwork, which the judge collects. However, an unexpected outburst occurs as Sydney suddenly begins arguing with both the judge and the transport officer. He adamantly refuses to leave the court at that moment, while the officer attempts to escort him out. This provokes Sydney to the point of losing control. In his rage, he throws a stack of papers from the table directly at the judge. In a surprising turn of events, Sydney manages to overpower the transport officer. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, Sydney's mother erupts in emotional outbursts. Concurrently, Sydney grabs hold of a telephone and hurls it towards the judge, causing a computer monitor to topple over. However, Judge Rhimes swiftly steps in, displaying remarkable control and effortlessly subduing Newsome by pinning him onto the desk. It becomes evident that the judge has handled such situations before. Sydney's brother becomes involved, assisting the judge in restraining Sydney, although it remains unclear whether his intentions are to help the judge or his brother. The situation escalates into complete chaos until 4 additional transport officials rush in for assistance. Some attempt to escort Sydney out of the room, while others focus on leading Sydney's brother aside. With the room now resembling a free-for-all, 2 officers grapple with Sydney, while the remaining 2 struggle to restrain Sydney's brother. The courtroom has transformed into a chaotic battleground. Meanwhile, their mother is visibly distraught at the rear of the room, unable to contain her emotions. The court clerks diligently work to regain control, restoring order by readjusting the computer monitor and collecting the scattered paperwork. Once the chaos subsides, the judge proceeds to impose an additional charge of contempt of court against Sydney, resulting in a 48-hour jail sentence. Surprisingly, Sydney's brother does not face any charges related to the incident. This is Michael Madison, a convicted serial killer who brutally murdered 3 women, Angela Deskins, Shatisha Sheely, and Sherelda Terry. In July 2013, he was indicted on charges of aggravated murder and kidnapping. The victims' bodies were found near Michael Madison's apartment building in East Cleveland. During police questioning, Michael admitted to strangling 2 of the women, but claimed no recollection of killing the 3rd victim. Angela Deskins was 38 years old, Shatisha Sheely was 28, and Sherelda Terry was only 18 at the time of her tragic death. The discovery of their bodies shook the community, leaving their loved ones in deep mourning. Michael Madison was subsequently convicted of these horrific crimes and sentenced to death. Given the circumstances, it comes as no surprise that Van Terry, the father of Sherelda Terry, was filled with anger while delivering his impact statement, to the point where he expressed the urge to physically confront Michael. Throughout the court proceedings, Michael displayed a complete lack of remorse. However, the situation took a tragic turn when Van Terry, while delivering his statement, caused a disruption that threw the court case into disarray.
How you doing, Your Honor? My name is Van Terry. Father Sherelda Terry. Right now, I guess we're supposed to, in our hearts, forgive this clown. He's touched our families, taken my child.
After turning to face Michael Madison, Van Terry pauses for a brief moment, seemingly contemplating his next move. Suddenly, he lunges towards Michael, attempting to strike him, but a court officer swiftly intervenes and prevents the attack. Amidst the chaos, someone in the courtroom repeatedly calls out, "Terry!" while Van Terry, consumed by anger and visibly in tears, expresses his intense emotions. Eventually, Van Terry is escorted out of the courtroom, restrained, through the back door, but no charges are filed against him. Michael Madison, on the other hand, was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. In an interview with CNN, Van Terry stated that he did not recall attempting to physically confront Michael Madison.
Why did you do that?
I don't recall doing it. It was an instance of grieving, and I just snapped.
This is Tristan Lamoureux, who had already pleaded guilty to the murder of Misty Lamoureux, a 19-year-old, and faced additional charges of firearm possession and failing to stop for the police. Misty's body was tragically discovered in their shared apartment, having suffered multiple gunshot wounds to the head. After a brief pursuit, Tristan was apprehended by the police. During the sentencing, Misty's brother, Jason Wilson, was called to deliver a statement. Initially, the proceedings were going smoothly, but as Jason turned to face Tristan, who appeared unaffected and nonchalant, the atmosphere grew tense. Jason stood there, locking eyes with Tristan, creating a palpable sense of anticipation in the courtroom. Jason attempted to shout at Tristan, but Tristan showed no signs of concern, further fueling Jason's anger. It became evident to court officials that Jason was on the verge of taking action. They swiftly moved towards him to intervene, but Jason lunged forward in an attempt to strike Tristan. Though narrowly missing his target, a court official responded with a forceful action, protecting Tristan from harm, and the impact reverberated throughout the room. The courtroom descended into complete chaos, with disorder reigning for some time before order was finally restored. Jason was restrained and escorted out of the room. As part of the plea deal, Tristan's charges of possession of a firearm by a restricted person and failing to stop for the police were dropped. However, he was sentenced to serve 15 years to life in prison for the murder of Misty Lamoureux. This is Jason Howard, who was accused of being responsible for the deaths of his girlfriend Jamila West and her 3 children, Jameer, Travian, and Jakia. However, he was not in court for the death of Jamila West. He was actually the prime suspect in the murder of Philip Daly, and he was facing charges of murder related to that case. On a seemingly ordinary day, November 16, 2006, during Jason Howard's pre-trial hearing for aggravated murder, a man identified as Lewis West, the brother of Jamila West, unexpectedly bursts into the courtroom. Despite Jason being restrained with handcuffs, Lewis manages to attack him, leaving Jason defenseless. It's worth noting that there is no concrete evidence directly linking Mr. Howard to the death of Jamila West, but her family strongly believes that he is responsible. In a display of their anger, the West family resorts to physical violence to express themselves. Fortunately for Jason Howard, a reporter inside the courtroom intervenes by grabbing hold of his chain and pulling him back, preventing further harm. The court officer swiftly enters the scene and forcefully restrains Lewis West. However, this only resolves half of the problem, as another family member jumps over the divider and attacks Jason Howard. Complete chaos ensues, with people shouting, restraining others, and adding to the commotion. Thankfully, additional personnel arrive as backup, and a sergeant in the courtroom instructs everyone to calm down and take their seats. Lewis West and his cousins are subsequently arrested and charged with assault and contempt of court. The court sentences Jason to life imprisonment. However, Jason maintains his innocence, asserting that he did not kill Jamila.
I mean, I was a protector and a provider for my family, but I wasn't there to protect her and die with her. And I wish I was. I mean, to be honest with you, I'd rather be dead right now.